and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to continue our exploration of basic transportation management in SAP S/4HANA Cloud, but we are going to take a slight bend in the road and digress to look at a conundrum that was put to us by a prospective customer that we have here in the region. Now, the slide that is shown on screen is to illustrate what that conundrum was. And quite basically, on one hand, we have a pick list, which is providing a warehouse picker information pertaining to the items that he needs to go and pick, what the material code is, where he's going to find it, if there is a specific batch number that he must utilize, the quantity that he must issue from the inventory to a staging area, and the quantity as well as the customer for whom he is doing this pick. On the other hand, we have a couple of waiting trucks waiting to be loaded. And in the middle, of course, we have this conundrum, this question mark that the warehouse picker has, which is, I've done this pick, in which truck should I now be loading this particular pallet or box or goods that I have? And if we look at the next slide, we are going to add an additional element of complexity, which is that you are going to be staging materials potentially in several waves throughout the day. You are potentially going to have a whole ballet of trucks coming in and out of your warehouse, expecting for an optimal and expedited process to happen. It is also in your interest to be able to have an optimal and optimized process from picking through to loading to avoid potentially delaying a truck, potentially paying penalty fees, potentially missing a delivery window at one of your customers. So this requirement of being able to have a very clear indication of this pick needing to go onto this particular truck or freight order becomes really important. Now, before you jump willy-nilly into the system trying to see what's going to stick, I would recommend that you first plan this off the system. So lay down what it is that you are trying to do. Try and understand what are the objects that you are going to need to realize this implementation, this in-app extensibility. Now, in our case, we want to amend a print form. So that already tells us that we are going to need to create a custom form, which in this case is going to be a custom pick list. And what we need to do is we need to add a custom field onto this form. So again, this by deduction tells us that we need to create a custom field. Now, obviously this field is not going to be filled by magic. So the next step is identifying the need to add some custom logic, which is going to tell the system what logic it needs to leverage in order to retrieve the information that we need to get and print on the custom form. The next step is identifying what are the CDS or CDSs that I'm going to need to leverage to retrieve that information that I need. Now, you may not always need a custom CDS because sometimes the logic is simply going to be a calculation, but in our case, we'll need a custom CDS. And then lastly, once you've done all of this, you also need to leverage the output parameter determination app to let the system know when do you want this output to go out, i.e. print immediately or deferred by a job. Is it applicable to certain criteria, i.e. only valid for the country US or for a specific customer? And then you also need to go to the SSC UIs to do some customizing and declare your custom form as being an output type of, in this case, delivery. And then once you've done that, then you can jump into the system. And I can assure you that having that clarity will help you progress much quicker once you get into the system. Okay, so now that we are back in the system and as per our plan, let's first look at the custom field that we have created. To do so, we access that with the app name custom fields. In the custom fields tab, we find our custom field named freight order. As I said earlier on, the business context is very important, and in this case has been set to shipping delivery because we will be using this custom field in the context of a picking list, which is associated to an outbound delivery. The field is of type text, and if we go into the field per se, we can see that the length has been set to 20 characters long, and here we also have the option to activate this field in certain other connected technical objects. The only objects where we are interested is the form template. So if we go to this tab, we can see that there are 4 form templates in which this field could be activated, but we have only enabled it for the pick list, which here you can find our own custom form that we have created for the purpose of this recording. You can also click on this hypertext hyperlink, and this will open up a separate window giving you more details into that custom form template. Here again we find the data source, which is important because our field has been published to this data source or extended in this data source. We can also see the form type, which is of type content, and we also have a number of connected translations that have been copied when we copied the standard pick list as a basis for creating our own custom object. And of course, once you are done, you obviously need to publish your creation or changes to make sure that they come into effect. Okay, let's move on to the next object. Okay, so as per our plan, the next object that we are interested in is going to be the custom logic associated to our custom field. So again, for that we go to the custom field app, except that this time we go directly to the custom logic tab, and we have already pre-searched our implementation, which is this one. Again, of importance is the business context, which we want to happen in the scope of shipping and deliveries. Let's click on it to go into the implementation, and this will show our code. And again, I'm not a developer, so I'm sure that some of you are going to balk at my code, but it does the job for the purpose of this particular episode. Essentially what I am doing is I am setting an if condition, so setting some conditions of why and when this logic should be accessed. And you can see that the logic that we have implemented is simply to select a single freight order number from a CDS, which in this case is a custom CDS. And we are going to put the retrieved value into a field called delivery document out. So this is a parameter that is part of this implementation. And we are going to put the retrieved value into our custom field, which is called YY1 freight order. And we've also then set a condition of which freight order number it is that we want to retrieve. And we are essentially here saying that the where clause is that we want to retrieve a freight order where the delivery number corresponds to the one that is going to be found in this particular custom CDS. And also because that field is somewhat long and left filled with zeros, to make it more readable and presentable on the form, we're also getting rid of all the leading zeros, and that's the value that we are going to retrieve. What we can quickly do is look at this particular CDS, and for that we go directly to the app named Custom CDS Views. And here we find the custom CDS that was also referenced in our custom logic. So if we go into it, we can see that this custom CDS is made up of only one primary data source, and this primary data source is a standard SAP CDS. And we could have also directly used this standard CDS in our custom logic. So you might be asking, well, why are we using this custom CDS if the standard CDS did the job? The reason for that is very simple, in that this custom CDS I had already used in the dashboard and analytics episode, and what I had done here is I had added a couple of custom fields which were calculated fields on which there was already some logic that had been applied to remove the leading zeros. Otherwise I could have directly added that additional custom code in my custom logic as well. And lastly, before we now see how from a business point of view this process is going to unfold, let's quickly look at the form in the Adobe Lifecycle Designer. So this is the custom form that we have created. So we can see here called YY1 PREV1 pick list English. And as a result of creating our custom code and enabling it for our form, this has then added our custom field freight order to our custom form and the relevant data source. So if we look at the data view, we are then able to find our custom field here, which is YY1 freight order underscore DLH. And all that I did really was drag and drop the field in the area where I wanted it to print, which is going to be in the top right quadrant of the pick list. So it'll be front and center for the warehouse picker, and he'll know exactly what freight order it is that he is picking for, and he'll know where he needs to stage the materials that are going to be on this particular pick list. Now, what you could also obviously do is, if you had created your own field here, what is of course important is that in the data binding you do reference the correct field in the data binding. So that could have also worked, but as I said, drag and drop does the job, and then you can access the characteristics and parameters of that field to tailor them the way you want them to be. Okay, so this is the custom form. So let's jump back into S4 and see how this unfolds from a business point of view. All right, so now that we are back in SAP, I've already gone on to create a sales order. It's a vanilla sales order, nothing extraordinary about it. The order is 990, it only has one item, and as I saved it, it generated a freight unit in the background, which is what we are now going to go and plan. To do so, we go to the transportation cockpit. I'm just going to keep my vanilla selection parameters, and in the cockpit I'll quickly flip to a different page layout that allows me to see just the freight units that I need to plan. So there's only one. Let's double check it is our sales order 990, which is correct. I'm going to pick the first resource that I see and plan that freight unit to that resource, which generates a temporary freight order number, which I am going to save. So my freight order number is this one here. I'm going to click on it to open it up in a separate window. And once it shows up, I'm going to flip to edit mode and add some information pertaining to the carrier that I'm going to be using. I'm also going to fill in the purchasing organization, purchasing group, and save those additional changes, which are processed correctly. And then of course the next step is to create the deliveries, which I can do in the freight order, or I could also program a separate batch job to do so. I'll just do it now in the freight order, and we can see that we have a delivery 80,414 that has been generated. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to go and look at the created delivery. So for that we go to manage outbound deliveries. We can see our delivery here. We click on the line to go into it. Then we go to the output tab to look at the various outputs. We see that there are 3 outputs. We click on show details so that we can access the PDF that was generated. And as you can see here, we can see our freight order number corresponding to the delivery that we created from the freight order. So there you go. The warehouse picker now has the information that the picking that he is performing of these items is for this particular freight order, so he knows that he needs to stage those materials in that area that is dedicated to loading the truck that will come in to execute this freight order. There you go. As usual, we thank you for your patronage. We thank you for your likes, your subscription to the channel. They really help us to create more content for you in the future. Until next time, stay safe.